Hey, what's up guys? Welcome back to the channel and for episode 2 of Shift Talk, which I think is gonna be a really fitting name for this because we're gonna do some trash talking in this episode. Now, it's gonna be on the S650, specifically what I think are the problems with the S650 in general and kind of why that reflects on the sales numbers a bit. I own an S650, it's all fun here. Like, we're not trying to trash people's cars or anything like that. It's all fun here again. Like I said, I own an S650, so I think that has some credibility on what we're gonna talk about here, but let's get started. So the first thing I wanna talk to you guys about is the sales numbers for the S650. Now, we all know that they have not been selling very well. The 2024 was the worst year for Mustang sales in its entire history. And then we have the 2025, and it was following that very well with the 2024 being, again, one of the worst selling Mustangs for the year. Now, the last couple months, I was looking at the numbers, the last couple months, and they definitely have been picking up. People are saying like they're doubling in sales. That's not really true. They're doubling from some of the worst months they had in 2025. So they're doing better, and I think there's a few reasons for that. But also to mention, they have sold over 40,000 units for 2025, which is better than 2024. So that is a good thing for the life of the Mustang or its life cycle. Obviously, it's still not doing super well. Certainly not as good as the S550s or the S197s before it. So the reason why I think sales numbers have picked up a little bit is because I think they're trying to get the last of the 2025 models before the 2026s start hitting the dealership lots heavier. So the 2026, obviously it's gonna be a little bit more expensive. Now, the 2026 S650s aren't quite as much of a price jump as it was from the 24 to the 25 models, but I think it's on average about $1,000 increase. But the problem with that though, is for the 2026 models, they're dropping features, which are now gonna have to be additional add-ons when originally in the 2025s, they just came with packages. So, for example, a few things I know off the top of my head that are dropping for the 2026 models is for the premiums, the door sill lighting, the Mustang projection, like that pony Mustang projection from the mirrors. And then I think there's some other lighting options that are disappearing. Just overall, there's relatively small options that they're dropping from the 2026s that they had in the 2025s that you would just get with the packages. Some of them are just gonna no longer be available, and then some of them are still gonna be available, but you have to purchase them additionally along with whatever package they used to come with. One, that's obviously kind of annoying, okay? I don't think that's going to help Ford very much in terms of their 2026 Mustang sales. But I guess we'll see. I don't really expect the 2026s to do super well, but nobody can predict the future. So, I guess we'll see as time unfolds. I have heard some people saying that the reason why the 2025s have picked up a bit in terms of their sales numbers is because of the tunability was unlocked. I don't know if that really correlates because NA tuning was unlocked back in June. And then boosted tuning was unlocked back in like early August. So they're kind of on a 5 to 6 month delay there in terms of when car sales picked up. Maybe there is a little bit of truth to that. There certainly possibly could be, but I feel like it's probably not quite that just because there's been such a delay. Even after tuning was unlocked, sales numbers continued to sink. Boosted tuning was unlocked, sales number continued to sink, and then the last couple months of 2025, they picked up. I think it's more due to just people are trying to get the 2025s before the 2026 models come out. And the 2026 models, absolutely nothing new. At least nothing meaningfully new. I know they have the new Fox FX kind of color appearance package. I guess if that's your thing, that's kind of cool. For me, no, not really. And then they have a couple more colors that they're adding, which is interesting, but I don't think that's really gonna save the sales numbers for the Ford Mustang. Now, the interesting thing though, is that Ford has always done very well, I feel like, in comparison to General Motors. Right now, we're on a flip timeline here where Ford is not doing super hot, but Chevrolet absolutely is. Their EVs are selling really well, all their crossovers are selling really well, their Pickup trucks are selling pretty well, and then the Corvettes are obviously flying off like hotcakes. I mean, they're pumping out Z06s and 01s in like record numbers. I read somewhere that they're producing like 3 to 5 01s a day. So that I think is super cool for General Motors. I have such a soft spot for those 01s and those Z06s. It's the flat plane crank that Ford never figured out. Just because the GT350 was so riddled with so many issues. It is such a problem car. I still love them so much, but everybody, like, we all kind of know it. Buying a GT350 is an anxiety-inducing device to drive. Like, I've wanted one for so long. I constantly contemplate buying one, but God, there's such a risk that comes with those cars. But anyways, getting off topic a little bit here, back to the issues of the S650. I think the second issue with the S650 is so far, there has never been an interesting S650 that's been produced by Ford. Like, not really. So just to give you guys an example of what I mean by this, when the S550 came out for the 2015 model year, they had also brought out the GT350. Now, in very, very small numbers. Somebody correct me if I'm wrong on this, but I think there was only like 26 units produced for the 2015 model year of the GT350. So obviously not really much produced for 2015, and those units that were definitely go for a very pretty penny. They're marked very, very high just because they were so far and few between for that model year. 2016 is really when the GT350s really hit hard in the production line, but they did introduce the GT350 in 2015. That was the exact same year that the 2015 Mustang came out. So that was really cool for the S550. And right off the bat, the S550 had very interesting things about it. Also too, even when I remember when the 2015 S550 Mustang was launched, like I remember at their showcase or whatever, I think it was at the Detroit Auto Show, I could be wrong on that. But they were like talking about like so many cool things about it. Like you could get, you know, Ford Performance superchargers directly from the dealerships, which is true for the S650, but they were actually talking about like really cool performance things you could do with the S550 Mustang right off the bat. Like really, really cool things. When the S650 came out, they really had nothing super interesting to say about it. You had like remote rev, so they brought out a key and like revved it. I guess if that's your thing. To me, that's pretty gimmicky, but you know, I guess whatever. But I feel like that just kind of shows that when the S650 was launched and when they were debuting it, there's nothing really interesting about them, and there still isn't anything interesting about them. Now, I think they're still good cars, but there's just nothing special about them right now. They don't have any Shelbys out there. You know, I know there's a Shelby GT350. That's not Ford's fault. I know when I saw that, I'm sure a lot of you guys out there saw that. That was like really disappointing to see. That GT350 for the S650 model, that's produced by Shelby American. Ford currently does not have license usage for the Shelby name for them to put into the production cars. I think I've read a rumor that they are trying to get that relicensed. They usually kind of license it and then relieve it and then license it and relieve it, and they just kind of go through that pattern. But I think I saw a rumor somewhere they are trying to relicense the Shelby name so they can actually use that moniker on their cars. But Shelby American holds that so they can kind of do whatever they want with it. That's not Ford's fault. I know there's a lot of people like screaming at Ford when the S650 GT350 came out. It's just another Mustang GT parts car with a Whipple, which I've talked about before, and we'll talk about here shortly in a little bit. But yeah, just generally, S650, just not that special. So let's talk about the dark horse a little bit. I hate that car. I'm just kidding. I don't actually hate the dark horse, but I kind of hate the pricing and everything that pricing model stands for with that car. To be fair, I don't actually really hate the dark horse. I think it's actually a really cool car. If I could afford one, I would have a dark horse over my Mustang GT. Just to be perfectly fair to all you dark horse owners, you guys definitely have a cooler, better car than us Mustang GT owners. We'll say that right away, like right off rip. But the pricing for that car, I think, is insane. I think it's totally crazy. Just for fun, what I did yesterday actually is I went to Ford.com, did build and price your own Mustang, picked a Dark Horse Premium, put the handling package on it, and just kind of fully optioned it out. There's a bunch of little like weird accessories that you can get, like different colored lug nuts or like car covers. I didn't opt for anything like that, but I built a Dark Horse in the exact spec I would want it. And I got it almost to $85,000. And I was wholly insulted, like sick to my stomach to see a NA Coyote-based Mustang where when you build and price it on the Ford website, they're asking $85,000. Like, that truly made me ill. So what I did, and I did this for you guys, okay? I called Ford to ask them how are they so out of their minds to price a naturally aspirated 5-liter Coyote Mustang at $85,000. And they just started laughing, I think mostly at me. It was actually really embarrassing. So I didn't get really far in that phone call, but I still think that's really crazy. They're in GT500 territory and GT350R territory when those cars came out. Now I know they're a few years older, but inflation hasn't hit that much, okay? Inflation definitely hasn't hit $20,000 to $25,000 in the past couple of years. At least it doesn't feel like it should. So like holy, it is, because of that, it makes me despise the Dark Horse so much. How unaccessible and underperforming of a car it is for $85,000 with the moniker Ford Mustang. Now, to be fair to my Dark Horse owners, I know I just kind of ripped on the car a little bit, but to be fair to my Dark Horse owners out there, like I said, you guys do have a better car than the Mustang GT. Like of course, it's definitely a cooler car. I know there's some preference in terms of if people really like the appearance of the front end over the Mustang GT. But either way, if you guys have a manual car, you guys definitely have the better transmission. It's definitely have better suspension, better brakes. You guys also have stronger connecting rods in your 5-liter Coyote. And just overall, it is a better car for sure. Now, again, to be fair, I feel like if you can get a Dark Horse kind of in the $60,000 range, really, the low $60,000 range, and I know it can happen. You may have to forego the handling package on the Dark Horse, but I've seen some pretty decent deals out there, I think. And actually, I saw somewhere online, somebody got like over $5,000 off on a Dark Horse. But I feel like if you fight a little bit, you call enough dealerships and are willing to travel, you can get a pretty decent deal on a Dark Horse where you're not paying MSRP or God forbid, even over MSRP for those. And if you're kind of landing in the low 60s, maybe you don't get the premium and maybe you don't get the handling pack, but if you're kind of in the low 60s, I think for sure a Dark Horse is much more worth it in that price point. But it still just blows my mind. $85,000 for an NA 5-liter Coyote car is like totally crazy. It is like, it's despicable, okay? It's insulting is what it is. So this kind of brings me into something else I want to mention that I feel like people don't really talk about, but I kind of find this to be true, but I'd be super curious to hear your guys' opinion on this. I feel like Ford is really good at intuition pumping their customers, where they will give really cool names to their Mustang lines that are up badged, so anything above a GT, they're really good at giving cool names to make you feel like it's an extremely special car, where it's justified and it's worth a very significant price increase. So obviously with any Shelby car, they do just feel special, okay? If you have a Shelby GT350, Shelby GT500, it feels extremely special, extremely exclusive, even though maybe it really isn't, but it just feels that way. And I think Ford is really good at that branding game. Like, they just do a really good job with that. And they kind of did this with the Mach 1. Now, I know the Mach 1 doesn't quite have the heritage that anything, from the Snake line, the Shelby badging, but even still, the Mach 1 definitely does have a heritage. It still sounds really cool. It definitely makes you feel like the car is a lot more special than just a typical Mustang GT. And it kind of did the same thing with the Dark Horse. Now, the Dark Horse is brand new to the Mustang, but it's just another badge, another technique Ford is really good at giving that intuition pump to make you feel like, okay, this is a really special car. when at the end of the day, the dark horse, I'd make the argument all day long that it absolutely is not a special car. Not really. There's nothing special about it. So it has a Coyote engine, really great engine. We love them here. We've owned a lot, but it's not a special engine. A Tremec TR3160, really good transmission, very, very good, much better than MT82 overall, but it's not a special transmission. The Camaros have been coming with the T56 back from the early 90s, and then they went to the TR6060s, which is just an evolution of the T56, and I think some models have a 3160 for the Camaro line. Dodge Challengers, if you got a manual, it was always a Tremec transmission. Corvettes, obviously always a Tremec transmission. So Ford really should have been putting the Tremec in their Mustangs since the Coyote came out. Now, obviously it's a cost thing. Need a break. Now, obviously it's a cost thing, and I don't think it's really gonna get better. So I know there's a refresh that they're talking about happening in 2028 or the 2029 model year. I know people have been saying 2027 is gonna get a refresh. I highly doubt that. I guess we'll see. If I could make a bet on it, I would. I'd bet the farm. But yeah, I would guess 28 or 29 model years when they're gonna do a refresh for the Mustang. It's still not ever really gonna get a Tremec for the GT models. And the reason is because it's a lot of money to invest that. And the take rate for the manuals, unfortunately, is just so low, and it's constantly dropping. I've said this so many times, everybody buys a 10 or 80 Mustang and not an MT82. And obviously there is some significant pull. If the Mustang was a Tremec, I think there would be a very, well, relatively meaningful shift in that 10 or 80 versus manual Mustang numbers. But you know, it is what it is. The take rates are really bad for manual cars right now, and they're going down. So I don't really expect Ford, who's already hurting in the money department, going to invest that into a Tremec for the GT line. So we're stuck with the MT82. Love it or hate it, I hate it, but it is what it is. So that's kind of the issue with the S650, or at least another one for it. But what I did want to do is kind of give you guys an example of what I mean by Ford being really good at intuition pumping in terms of their Mustang branding to make you feel like a car is really special. And this is something that Chevrolet doesn't do very well. So for example, I used to own a 2018 Camaro ZL1 1LE. That was a really cool car. And that felt like probably one of the most special cars I've ever driven. Just being the absolute top of the line track package Camaro out there. It just felt so cool driving it. And there's definitely just so many enhancements, even just sitting in the interior. The cockpit was just littered with Alcantara. It was really pretty. Now, I've driven a few GT350s in my life, and I've driven a couple GT500s, and really cool cars. They feel really special, but none of them felt even really close to as special as that Camaro ZL1 1LE did. Not that you like really had to be in the know, but you had to be relatively familiar with cars. So whenever I would tell people the car I drove, you know, they'd be like, "Oh, a cool Camaro. Like my cousin has one of those." And it's like, no, they don't. They don't have a ZL1 1LE. They have like a Camaro RS or something. Which I didn't actually say it like that, but you know, I always felt like I had to over-explain the car if people didn't know what a ZL1 1LE was. But for the people who did, like their jaws would drop to the floor. Like they would be obliterated from the neck up. Like they were just like so shocked that somebody that they knew or was talking to had a ZL1 1LE. And not to like put myself in such a high and mighty status, I bought the car for like $58,000. This is way back when the car market was like totally crashed. So, you know, $58,000 back when, again, the car market was crashed, economy was doing super well. Certainly not like a super crazy price for a car. Definitely on the higher end, but you know, certainly nothing insane. But like just people who knew what it was, like they were, you know, they were always just like so shocked and so impressed because it was such a cool car. But the problem is when you say ZL1 1LE, that's not like, that's just a random alphanumeric string of characters. and doesn't really translate to anything super cool. Not like how good Ford is at naming their cars. So if you tell people like you have a Shelby, you don't really have to know cars all that well, but like they'll know relatively well what you're talking about. Like, okay, Shelby Mustang, GT500, GT350, they usually kind of have a decent idea. And the Shelby line just has such incredible heritage behind it. I'd actually argue the ZL1 has an even more incredible heritage, specifically the Copo ZL1 in 1969, which was the first all aluminum production engine. So all our aluminum engines now you can thank for the 1969 Copo ZL1. Just a fun fact for you guys. I would argue the ZL1 has more heritage than the Shelby does. But anyways, you know, there is a very much more known heritage for the Shelby line. So that just makes the cars sound and feel and come off way more special than generally Z28, ZR1, Z06. You know, I'm sure, obviously, you know, people who are listening to this right now know what those monikers are and what they mean and that they are special and they are really cool. But to those who are uninitiated, Shelby, Mach 1, they just seem to hit harder. And like I've been saying, Ford is just really good at that. So I feel like people, I don't want to say people fell for it, but you know, people definitely bought into the Dark Horse moniker, and you know, it feels like such a special car, like it's so cool, it's exclusive, it's limited. And I guess so, and certainly some pretty meaningful ways it kind of is there, but it's just not special. It's like Coyote with a Tremec. Like it's the Mustang GT that we should have got back in 2011 is really all that car is. So I would make the case that Dark Horse is just a completely and wholly unspecial car, and it's really just hyped up to be more than it really is. Now, like I said, we're definitely doing some trash talking this episode. So to my Dark Horse owners out there, I'm not trying to single you guys out or say you guys bought a overly hyped car. It is a really good car. It is really cool. And like I said, if I could afford one, I would have a Dark Horse Mustang rather than my Mustang GT, specifically a Whippled Dark Horse Mustang. But again, they're just it's so insanely expensive for what they are. Just in general, the Mustang GT, especially if you guys are buying a 10 or 80 car, is just a much better bang for the buck. Unless you're really dedicating your Mustang to be just an absolute like track day weapon. And by track day, I'm not talking about straight line, you know, tracking a car, like actual, you know, turns and everything, you know, like high performance track days or whatever. I absolutely can see a much more significant use case in buying the Dark Horse, but you know, if you take that out of the equation, which, you know, most people aren't buying a Mustang to put on the track. Well, maybe I should take that back. You know, all the Mustang buyers there's probably a pretty limited amount that are buying a Mustang to put it on the track in that way. I think most people who are tracking their Mustangs are just doing drag strips, which is super cool. But if that's what you're doing, you're probably buying a 10 or 80 car because it's faster. And if you're buying a 10 or 80 car, I really don't see the value in the Dark Horse unless you just want that exclusivity, which there's nothing wrong with that. But really, I think the Mustang GT is just so much bang for your buck. So speaking of that, here's kind of another issue with the S650 Mustangs. And I know everybody talks about it. We talked a little bit about it at the beginning of the episode, but price. We've talked about the Dark Horse enough. We'll get back to the Mustang GTs. They're just too expensive. Like, they're just simply too expensive. You know, when I watch YouTube videos of people who have, you know, Gen 3 S550s, and they're talking about, oh, should I trade up? Should I just do it? You know, it'd be cool to make videos with a newer car. I get it, like, it, you know, kind of is. And I was one of those people who traded from, you know, a Gen 3 Coyote to a Gen 4 S650. But there's just no good price justification for it, like not even remotely. I think the S550 still holds a strong handle to the S650 in terms of looks. The Gen 3 is certainly a much more proven engine than the Gen 4. You're getting the same MT82 or the same 10 or 80 car. Your interior is not much different in terms of your seats, in terms of your center console, in terms of your door panels. They're basically all but the same. The dashboard and the center console certainly are different, but people, you know, there's plenty of people out there, they say, The S550, especially with the digital dash, is a better interior, or at least a cooler feeling, kind of more cockpit feel. I would agree with them. I think the S550 is definitely a much more cockpit inspired, kind of race car feeling interior, especially if you have the digital dash, which I'll still make to this day is the best dashboard ever fitted to a production car. The S650 is cool with iPad in front of you, but I don't know. It has a more premium feel to it for sure, but it definitely kind of lacks that, monolithic center waterfall style, which I think kind of isolates the driver and the passenger, which I think is a cool feeling. It feels more dedicated in your space, and overall, I feel like it feels a little bit cooler to sit in an S550, but it feels a little bit more luxurious to sit in an S650. So, opinions can go either way on those. I totally understand both. I have my preferences for different reasons for both of them, but yeah, the S550 is just such a bargain compared to the S650. There's no reason to spend the money and buy a new 2024 or new 2025 Mustang unless you just kind of want the newer model, which again is me. I fell into that trap, so here I am talking trash, but it's very much directed at myself, which is something we're working on. We don't want to talk bad about ourselves, okay? So all my gentlemen out there, don't do that. Treat yourself well. You deserve it. But anyways, so it's just really hard to justify spending that money. People still, on the rare occasion I talk about Mustangs in my personal life or with other people, they'll ask me like, hey, should I go buy a Gen 3 or a Gen 4? Buy the Gen 3. It's a faster car because it's lighter. The S650 doesn't make enough horsepower to overcome its crutch of a meaningfully heavier weight. The 0 to 60 times are faster in the S550 than they are with the new S650s. And I think the S550s, like I said, definitely have their preference in looks and style. They definitely still look really modern, really good. And there's just a lot more modifications out there, especially in terms of external parts that you can do to those Gen 3 Coyotes than what you can do with the Gen 4. So overall, I think that's the biggest killer of why the Mustang sales just don't do all that well, is because the price is too expensive. Now, the last topic I want to talk about with you guys, which we're really going to do some trash talking, are all the non-Ford based specialty Mustangs out there. So I've talked about this a bit before, and this kind of goes back into the uninteresting thing about the S650s, in my opinion. But we're talking about the Shelby American SSR, the Super Snake Rs, the Shelby American GT350s, the RTR vehicles, the Spec 3, the Spec 2, the Spec 5, and then Hennessy also just released their version of a, hybrid performance Mustang. And then obviously we have the GTD out there, which, kind of is Ford, kind of isn't. Was helped, produced, and researched by Multimatic in Canada. And the car is actually built by Multimatic, not at a Ford production plant. But anyways, the problem with all these cars is they're all literally the exact same. I know I've said this before in a past video, but the Shelby American GT350, it's a Coyote with a Whipple. The Shelby American SSR, it's a Coyote with a Whipple. The RTR Spec 3, Coyote with a Whipple. Spec 5, Coyote with a Whipple. Spec 2, it's a Coyote, but you can option with a Whipple. And the new Hennessy Mustang that came out, again, it's a Coyote with a Whipple. And the GTD, I know it's a Predator engine, it's a Eaton TVS supercharger, but they got their butt kicked by the 01 at the Nürburgring, so they're trying to beat the 01 naturally. So they threw a Whipple at it. So again, I know it's a Predator engine, but it's Coyote architecture, so I'm going to call it a Coyote with a Whipple. And it's just really boring. Okay, it's just really, really boring. And I know I have a Coyote with a Whipple that I showcase on the channel, but all these cars out there, they're all six figures that either start with a 1, 2, or 3. And they're just hyper expensive, hyper performance Mustangs, which are really cool, but they're all Coyotes with a Whipple. And the thing that's so shocking about it is the one thing that kind of really set me on the path to buy an S650 is, if you guys are familiar with Lebanon Ford, I think they're in Ohio, but the dealership is called Lebanon Ford. When the 2024 Mustang came out, you could buy from their dealership with full factory warranty now Now granted, an extreme base model, so you're not getting a premium and you're getting a 300A package Mustang with no features at all. But you definitely got the lights of the bunch, so there's, you know, that advantage to it. But you could buy a Mustang GT with a 6-speed manual MT82, and they would throw a Whipple supercharger stage 1 on top of it, and you could walk out the door before taxes. But you could walk out the door paying $49,999. A Whipple Mustang rated at 810 horsepower, you could buy from a Ford dealership for under $50,000. And I think this was probably the best thing that ever happened to the S650. And it was kind of the thing that, again, like I said, really set me on the path, like, okay, let me check out this S650. Maybe I do want to trade in my Gen 3 for this. And at the end of the day, this under $50,000 2024 Whipple Mustang GT is on the same straight line performance level as all these $100,000, $200,000, $300,000, maybe with some exception of the GTD. But this Mustang was on the same straight line performance level as all these other, you know, hyper-priced 6-figure Mustangs that they've been building out there. Especially if you just threw a drag pack at it, I bet you'd definitely beat all the other Mustangs in a straight line if they're just on their typical street tire setup. So under $50,000, go throw a $3,000 drag pack at your Lebanon Ford Whipple supercharged Mustang, and you're probably in the performance level and even beating all these Shelby American RTR spec vehicles. So that car I thought was super interesting because it was so cheap, but all the other ones are just the same exact thing over and over again. And we've just seen a Gen 4 Coyote with a Whipple so many times, and they certainly have their place in this world. Like I said, I have my Whipple GT Gen 4 Coyote, but the hyper-priced Mustangs, they're cool, but I just don't think they're really worth all their salt. So again, along with the S650 just being not super interesting with no really cool models that came out with its launch and still haven't been out since it's been out, and that still haven't even come out yet. They're just not super interesting, and all the ones that should be are just kind of boring. So I hope you guys appreciated my yap on all the issues I think are current with the S650 Mustang. I think a lot of this stuff is correctable. They could launch some really cool Shelby models, bring back a GT350, probably not going to do a flat plane crank again. They kind of, you know, Ford definitely took a bullet there, and you know, those GT350s, as cool as they are, they kind of are a reliability meme. So I don't think they're going to take a chance on that again. But a GT500, like, there's a lot of cool things that Ford can still do with the Mustang and make it extremely interesting again. But I appreciate you guys tuning into this video, and to give you guys my normal spiel. Don't worry about liking, commenting, or subscribing. I'm not going to browbeat you to guys do that. If you guys want to like or comment or subscribe, I'd be more than honored. I'm just happy you guys are here watching my content and enjoying what I'm doing on YouTube. I'm trying to get some value out there, get some new opinions, and just kind of showcase more of what generally I see with people with, you know, 2025 Mustangs with Whipples on them. So again, don't worry about any of that. If you guys are here, that's all I could ask for. Thanks for tuning in, and I will catch you guys in the next episode of Shift Talk. Take care.